Okay, we're recording, and this is the first of the two lessons on control. And this particular lesson aligns to the week beginning 2nd October. I'm going to share my screen with you and go through a presentation. You are going to be making notes as you go along, and you'll pause and make copies or notes of the PowerPoint slide deck that I'm using here. Okay, so let me get the presentation up on my screen so that I can go along with you. First step is to look at what we cover as a series of principles. And the principles are that we define what control is and look at its impact on an organization. We have to figure out whether there's some way to classify or categorize how control takes place, and there is indeed 4 steps in the control process. Then we look at the different types of output control and what that happens, or what happens and what that does to people. And we look at behavior controls. And then finally, we look at trust controls. So this obviously is a lot more than I would have covered in the sessions that I would have done in a classroom with you. And the value of this is that most of you didn't come to the session. So I'm hoping that you're watching the video lesson, and that makes up for the lack of contact that we would have preferred to have enjoyed. So definition-wise, it's a straightforward thing. We basically just want to know what's going on in the business, and we monitor what goes on, and we regulate what goes on if it's not going properly. And that's a hint at a process. So it just short and sweet, keeping it simple. It's about making sure that things run smoothly, nothing more than that. And there is, of course, a relationship between organizing and controlling, much as we saw there was a relationship between planning and organizing. And the relationship between organizing and controlling is that controlling is like a linking function. And where organizing focuses on how you allocate and assign and deploy resources, controlling says, are you deploying the resources effectively? Are they actually working for you? Is there some sort of point in this whole exercise? Now, if we control the processes that people operate, then we can figure out whether we're doing things adequately and whether we are enjoying the value that we intended to derive from putting those people and those processes together. So it is useful to know then that computers, which are, as we've already said in this module, fast, accurate, and reliable, control is something that can use computerization very effectively, because it gives you opportunity to see what's going on. It means, of course, that you have to have some way of detecting what it is that people are doing and what processes are achieving, because that's what you're then setting out to measure. The benefits are that, as I've provided to you before, if we're talking about fast, accurate, and reliable computers, point is that you're getting accurate information if the system is set up right, and I must emphasize that. If the system is set up right, then what you're getting is accurate information that you can use to take action when your processes are not working as well as you would like. That's what I mean by timely. So there are 3 different types of control you see illustrated for you here. And we've spoken about this if you've had opportunity to sit with me in a classroom. If you haven't, it's not a problem because it's on the screen. And we're saying that there is a feed-forward control, a concurrent control, and a feedback control. They tend to align with the input stage, the conversion stage, and the output stage of any business process. But it's not exactly that way. But that's the broad sense of understanding we have. In other words, if we're looking into the future to say, what do we anticipate happening? That's planning, and you're planning for inputs. if we're looking at what we're doing, if we're managing problems as they occur, well, we're monitoring what we're making. At the university, we make graduates. At Barter Shoes, they make school shoes. And then when there are outputs, we look at whether there were enough outputs, whether we made them at the cost that we thought we would, and whether we made as many as we thought we would when we were busy back here doing the anticipation. Now, your text, and any reasonable text for that matter, is going to point out that control is about allowing you to anticipate problems and fix problems as they arise, and take corrective action where necessary. So I've got a couple of sketches for you, a couple of images, and if you're a visual learner, this, as I am, this starts to make a lot more sense. There's the first of them, and the first step, if you like, of the process in a four-step process, as your textbook provides for you. You are saying what you would like to achieve. You're setting a goal, a target. You then measure that, and once you've performed the actions or the processes operated, if it's Barter Shoes and they want to make 1,000 pairs of shoes in a day, at the end of the day, they'll say, did we make 1,000 pairs? What was our actual performance compared to the target of 1,000 pairs a day? And then they'll take corrective action if they only made 900 shoes, or perhaps they made 1,500 pairs of shoes, because making too many shoes is going to be putting a strain perhaps on machinery, and perhaps a strain on the supply of raw materials that you have available to you. In other words, if you use up all of your Monday lunch money, you're not going to have lunch money for Tuesday. Same sort of thing. Okay. Now, there are alternative sketches and diagrams for you. I've said here's a 5-step one, and whereas the previous 4-step process doesn't include the action of analyzing deviations, where that's not being explained or emphasized, this particular sketch diagram does. So you might want to make a copy of this, reduce it to writing, put it in your notes, pause the video, in other words, and use a pen and paper, and write this down yourself, because that's a necessary learning event for you to get this down as a principle that you understand and will remember for a long time. There's another one. It's in the form of a flowchart. And the flowchart simply says, well, if we're looking at a process and we're setting a standard and you're measuring performance, then we are looking to, in step 3 of a 4-step process, say, does the actual performance match the standard? Because if it does, then there's nothing left to do. If it doesn't, then you're going to have to take corrective action. So again, there is no particular diagram I want you to commit to memory in any way, but I do need for you to understand what the process is, because that's vital. So we recognize that if we're looking at output controls and behavior controls and trust controls, then they arise in particular ways, and the second video lesson is going to be the one that puts this in detail. So I'll make sure that it's in that particular video as well. But the kinds of output controls we perform are about having budgets or plans, make decisions arising in the form of a planned budget for how we'd like to perform into the future. And behavior controls are about making sure that people get done what they need to get done in a period of time which is provided them to get the service or the activity done. And the trust controls are about making sure that people adhere to what would be the desired company culture. In other words, they arrive in time for their shift and they leave when the shift is complete and not beforehand. They don't complete the clock card of a buddy. In other words, everyone works as if they're one great big happy family, so to speak. I'm going to recommend that you look at this in your textbook, or alternatively that you make some notes by freezing this lesson and making notes from what you have frozen on the screen in front of you. But I will simply say that There are problems that arise here in practice when you're exerting control. For example, you are observing people, and the problems that arise are simply that when people are watched and observed, they don't respond in the way you would like them to. In other words, they feel that they have to behave in a particular way just to please you, so they don't demonstrate the kind of behavior that they ordinarily perform. It's misleading, is the point I want to make. And they might, in fact, resist a system if it doesn't satisfy them in terms of what they want to get out of the job. So if you have personnel who are not necessarily happy in the workplace, they would be wanting to take shortcuts to get the job done because it's not a job they like doing. And when they do that, they cause a problem for the enterprise and its processes. When they're observed, they behave as they should. And when the direct observation is not there, they just decline to operate as they are required to and will take their shortcuts. So while it would be very, very nice to think that you could just use artificial intelligence, if you like robot intelligence, to get stuff done instead of using people, it remains the case that people have value to add. We're training you here at university to have a value add, what I refer to as your value proposition that you can present to an employer and say, listen, if you employ me, this is the kind of stuff that I can do for you. That's the essential part. But when you one day are monitoring other people's performance, you'll find that they will get a little agitated at that because they don't feel comfortable with being observed. And if you've experienced in class, if I or another lecturer has asked you a question or asked the class a question, more often than not, particularly in the early stages of a university career, you feel very reluctant to answer a question in front of a whole group of your peers. It's much the same in business. So we recognize that some of the problems, the adverse issues which arise, are that you could end up creating a level of mistrust between groups. In other words, if you have the green guys and the blue guys manufacturing stuff, the green guys might start to mistrust the blue guys if they see that management is spending more time with the other group. It's a negative aspect, if you like, of exerting control over an enterprise's systems. That reduction in autonomy is something which affects us as human beings. We like to think that we are independent and that we are valuable as human beings. We don't like the fact that we might be reduced to being just another machine, operating other machines. It's something that distresses us. So I recommend again that you pause the video at this point in time and go through these aspects on your own. If what you want is a PowerPoint, a slide deck, a screenshot to guide you, start making notes if you pause the video at this point. Because you see, I'm almost done, and I'll get to my 15-minute desired time for a video of this nature in just a minute. So, in summary, control is about bossing people about, and that is a process, and the process is about monitoring and regulating the performance of the activities the enterprise performs, and there are 4 steps in that. If you have a performance standard, you can measure the performance against that standard and take action if there is a deviation which is outside of the adequate specification or the realistic expectation of what can be achieved. We would like it to be flexible, control that is, and accurate and timely, and computers are great for that. There are 3 categories of control: feedback control, concurrent control, and feed-forward control. We distinguish 3 types of control: output controls, behavioral controls, and trust controls. And there are tools of control. We can observe what's going on. We can get feedback, and that feedback can be oral, or it can be written, or it can be something a computer provides. So that, I have to say, all sounds good, but there's a potential downside, and this dark side is when people start to adjust their performance because they don't like the observation. Right. I have presented, by the looks of things, a 16-minute video this time around, and I will see you in the next one, and we'll talk about the practice of control.